Well, welcome everybody, and welcome everybody online. I'll just start with the Karakia, and then we'll get underway. A couple of people. Whakakato, whakataka, tiko, ki te uru, whakatakato ho, ki te tonga, kia makina kina kiuta, kia matalatala katai, ihe aki ana ti atakura, hi toi, hi huka, hi hohu, tihe Māori ora. Welcome everybody, and just to let everybody know what's happening with people. So we've got online Craig Rowley and Bill, and we've got Sam, and standing in for Mayor Bowen. Mayor Bowen, we've got Scott Shannon from Timaru, and standing in for Murray Black, we've got Ross Barnes, and at the moment we have an apology from Mayor Black, and we have an apology from Nigel Bowen, apology from Peter Scott, and we're just waiting for, we haven't received an apology yet from Craig Mackel from Kaikoura, and yeah, so we'll just wait for him. He may arrive later. Yeah, so just standing in for Peter today, and we've got a relatively simple agenda, hopefully. There's no conflicts of interest that I'm aware of for anybody. There's no deputations today. There's no urgent business, no notices of motion. And so we'll move on to item 7.1, which is the unconfirmed minutes from our meeting on the 24th of August. Are there any matters of accuracy that anybody has picked up? No? Then I'll put the motion. Thanks, Emily. The motion that the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee confirms the minutes from the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee meeting held on the 24th of August. Do I have anyone who can move that? Mayor Brown? Mayor Gordon? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll move on to item 8.1, which is the committee's resolution status report, and invite Jessie Burgess just to comment on that. Thanks, Jessie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora koutou. Yeah, so the purpose of this paper is to provide the committee the status of the previous resolutions from previous meetings. Just refer you to page 32 of your agenda. The only action still underway is the recommendation from the previous committee around the request to Canterbury Regional Council around including funding in year one of the proposed 24-34 long-term plan to commission and oversee the development of a market and rail utilisation study. That work's underway in terms of the inclusion of funding in the LTP for consideration by Environment Canterbury. So that work's progressing as we go through the LTP process. Other than that, all other resolutions are complete and annotated green in your papers. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jessie. Neil?
Thanks. I've just got a question on the green ones. Reply to Andrew Colville. It said provide a reply as soon as practical is complete. So a reply has gone to him?
Yes, I understand that has been sent through. Yes.
Have we seen it? Or do we see it?
Only process, but don't see why not. So we'd like that circulated.
He did present to us and we did talk about a reply, so probably if we ever run into him again, he might like conversation, we can know what he talked about. Yeah.
I think that'd be useful to have replies to all of those three people who provided the deputation and presented to us last time. I think they were, good presentations, so we'll arrange for that.
I think it's a very good point Mayor Brown raises, because if it's mayoral forum, for instance, the replies come to us in draft to approve before it goes. If that doesn't happen, perhaps that's something to reflect on with replies going on behalf of the committee, that we see a copy of it before it goes.
Yeah, I'd endorse that, because that will reflect the tone of the conversation we had. They spent the time to come in and talk to us. And we should reply back to them and know what it was. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are there any other questions on this paper? None. So I'll put the motion that the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee notes the status of previous resolutions provided in the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee Resolution Status Report, October 2023. Do I have a mover? James, thank you. And seconder? Thanks, Mayor Munro. Mayor Munro. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, I need it. Well, yeah. I think we've had enough discussion on it. All those in favour, please say aye. Excuse me. Second. Right. We have a seconder. Mayor Gordon.
Forward to resolution.
I think who do I know? It was Anne. Sorry, not James and James Cagle.
Yeah.
Anne's name's not down there. Oh, James. Sorry. Apologies. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. So we'll now move on to item 8.2, the State Highway Designations Review, Issues and Options. And invite Tara Thorby, who's our strategic advisor, and Jessie as well. Thank you.
Kia ora. So the purpose of this paper is to provide the committee with information and potential options on how it may wish to proceed in the context of requesting that Waka Kotahi undertake a state highway designation review. This request was introduced by Mayor Broughton at the June 2023 meeting, and the report responds to the committee asking for information from staff prior to making a decision. I'll take the report as read, but to note a few key points. The report notes that Waka Kotahi have previously advised that a review of the state highway policy and evaluation criteria would ideally be undertaken before a review of the state highway designations took place. A state highway designations review can only be carried out by Waka Kotahi against the 2002 state highway evaluation criteria. And a review of the state highway designations would investigate opportunities for local roads to become state highways to improve the coverage and connectivity for the network. But also we need to consider whether existing state highways should become local roads against the set criteria. The report presents three options for consideration by the committee for how it may wish to proceed. Option one is the status quo, that we do not request Waka Kotahi undertake a review of the state highways designations in Canterbury. This option would allow Selwyn District Council to continue to engage with Waka Kotahi on specific roads where the council believes that a review is needed. This option would mean state highway designations for the rest of the region would not be reviewed, which may represent a missed opportunity for a more thorough review of the whole state highway network in Canterbury. Option two is that the committee requests that Waka Kotahi undertake a review of the state highway designations in Canterbury. The committee could advocate to Waka Kotahi for a review of the entire region's state highway network. This would ensure an integrated approach to the review. A review of the state highway designations across the entire region may present the risk that some of the existing state highways do not meet the criteria and in turn become local roads, which could lead to funding implications for the council or that council. Option 3 is that the committee requests that Waka Kotahi progress a review of the state highway policy and the state highway evaluation criteria as a priority. The committee could request that, opposed to undertaking review of the state highway designations in the region, that Waka Kotahi could first review the 2002 state highway policy as a priority. This option aligns with the advice previously received by Waka Kotahi that a policy review would ideally be taken before any reviews of the state highway designations be undertaken. This option would not prevent any individual councils engaging with Waka Kotahi on state highway designations in their own districts. Once the policy is reviewed, the committee could reconsider requesting a regional review of the state highway designations to be undertaken by Waka Kotahi against the new criteria. Staff have not provided a recommended option, but will support the committee to proceed with whichever is the preferred option. We're happy to take any questions as required.
Mayor Brown. Through the chair, just a question regarding, I'm obviously filling in for Murray Black today, so I'm a bit new to this. Just where do special purpose roads fit into this category? Is that in here somewhere and they just, but whatever option is?
If you could answer. Yep, no, through you, Mr. Chair. So special purpose roads are local roads. And so I guess in view of this paper, one could see a desire from councils for a special purpose road to be classified as a state highway, hence a review. But legally speaking, special purpose roads are local roads, not state highways. So hence perhaps the issue.
Let's take Craig Rowley and then Mayor Brown. Craig, just.
I think you got me now. Yeah, so we had a conversation about this, and we're quite nervous about this. And as far as our State Highway 82, which runs through our district, we would hate to see that as part of that review that was removed and it returned to a local road. So we do have some nervousness about the whole review process.
Thanks, Craig.
I wonder if we're asking the wrong question. Are we wanting to take state highways back to local roads, or was the question we would like local roads to become state highways? As I'm sure, and Mayor Sam may be able to answer that. What was the intent of his question at the last meeting? Because this is pointing in the wrong direction for us. We certainly don't want any roads to come back to us. We would like the other way.
Sam, would you like to reply to that?
Yeah, sorry, I put my hand up. Thank you for that, and that was the intention. For us, the concern is around roads, particularly where there's heavy freight usage on those roads, acting to produce massive amounts of GDP for the country, and yet local funding through rates is now maintaining those and improving them when they were never actually built or constructed to carry that for the country. So yeah, that was the thinking, Neil, around the local roads becoming state highways. I guess there is always in any review the opportunity to get something that you didn't want out of it, but that wasn't behind the request. And of all these options, I think that option 3, like, we do need to think about the policy itself and the evaluation, not just about doing the work with the existing criteria, because the work, I suppose the way that we are as a country now isn't the same as we were in 2005, and the things that we value about freight from the rural spaces to ports, and the work that Canterbury's done around phrase in particular has, seen that right at the forefront of the work we've done. So, yeah, I would still like us to pursue a review and to look at the policy in the first instance, and then how that might be applied to us would be secondary to that.
Thanks, Sam. I'll do is I'll put the motion, and then there'll be an opportunity for further discussion. Yeah, I'm going to. What I was going to do was just.
Questions for the staff.
Yeah. Well, are there any more questions for the staff apart from that? And sorry.
It's not such a so much a question, it's just a concern. I share this, Mackenzie District Council also shares the same concerns that Mayor Craig has actually raised too, that there is a possibility that some existing state highways may not meet the criteria and in turn become local roads, and that's not what we're after. So from that point of view, I have some concerns about what we do with this decision as well.
Yeah, Dan.
If I'm understanding correctly, because we too similarly have concerns about this, and I think as well articulated before by Mayor Neil and of course Mayor Han, with option 3 under 3.3, option 3 then be perhaps the safest option to consider, that sort of asking it to be reviewed, and then look at the evaluation criteria before we take any steps. That's how I read that. That to me seems the safest option rather than a straight into an option 2. Am I reading that correctly?
So my thoughts were that I was quite comfortable with going with option 1, actually, do nothing. And actually just allow Selwyn District Council to continue to engage with Waka Kotahi.
We've kind of moved into discussion, but that's okay. Right. Would you like to reply to that, Jesse?
May help. I guess the policy and criteria from 2002. So the first step in the process would be to review your policies and criteria before then moving into a designations review process, which could take shape of both looking at local roads and designations going, which either way. So I think understand what you're saying there, Munro, in terms of your concerns, and option 3 is only a request to Waka Kotahi to progress that policy and criteria review first, which would then open up, I guess, the opportunities for others around the table to consider the next step in the process, if you like, and what that means in terms of that criteria and that policy for your own roading network within your district. So the next stage after that would be to then look at that designations review, local road review, and see what that means in terms of that new criteria and new policy. So yeah, I just thought I'd add that to the conversation, and I'm not sure if James has got any further comments on that as well, but normally having your policies and things up to date before you then go into a next round of review processes would be the appropriate process.
I'll just go to Deputy Mayor Scott.
Thank you. So just to clarify how we looked at this in Timaru, of course, in principle, we agree with what Mayor Sam wants to do in Selwyn, and if that was able to happen at the same time as progressing the review of the highway policy and the criteria as a priority, that would be the best outcome as far as we're concerned, because same as the others, it does make us nervous about what could be handed back to us, which we simply cannot afford. And noting that, yeah, the policy is 20 years old effectively, that would have to happen at the same time. So we'd love to see Sam address some of his issues there, but we just wouldn't want it to affect us.
Mayor Crowley, Mayor Sam, and then Neil. Thank you. Mayor Crowley.
Yeah, just a question. I see in option 1, it says that and I guess it's to James, that there's a review by Waka Kotahi to take place. I was just, when is that planned to that work to take place, James?
For option 1, Craig, I'm not sure that there is a review planned. That's to say, I mean, we'd work with Selman to check that the criteria were being applied correctly, but I'm not sure that there's a review on our work program to do it. If I could just take just because of the discussion on option 3. Right.
Oh, okay. I just read in option 1 that it states that or delayed until the review of the state highway policy has been completed by Waka Kotahi. So I was of the understanding that there was a review due to take place, but I could be wrong. Thanks.
Yeah, so look, let me just clarify that point because it's implicit in all 3 options in a way. Waka Kotahi has been attempting to progress a review of the policy, the 2002 policy, for some years. It is not entirely ours to control. We need the agreement of the minister and the ministry, and we have not had that. So implicit in option 3, you could choose to make it explicit if the committee wanted to, but implicit in option 3 is further advocacy either from Waka Kotahi onwards or from the committee to others to enable that review to take place. It isn't entirely within Waka Kotahi's ability to simply choose to review the policy. Because we've been trying, right? Yeah. So I can't guarantee when one would happen if the request was made.
Okay, thanks for that. I was just probably misunderstanding my part. In that case, I'm with Anne that I think our preferred option will be option 1.
Okay, Mayor Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the clarity, Dan and Jesse, on what option 3 really means. We wouldn't want to get ourselves into a review on old criteria or not knowing what the outcome might possibly be. So option 3 is about asking for some updated criteria as a region, and it might be that following that it becomes up to councils to do it council by council. But even for ourselves, we wouldn't want to do that without first seeing the criteria and understanding the risks. But without the updated policy and criteria, we just can't do that. So the request is really for them to do the work so we know what we're playing with. Otherwise, yeah, it's just all too old for us and will become too hard. And even on an individual basis, we wouldn't be able to pursue that with confidence. So appreciate those that can support option 3 and understand why people might choose otherwise. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Neil.
It may be it may be useful to see what the 2002 criteria is. It may still be fit for purpose and may not need reviewing at all, that we could miss that step altogether and go to whichever. So I'm not sure how easy where this policy sits. So it's Waka Kotahi, it's on the website or where it is, but it may be fine where it is. It's lasted 20 years, but it may need a review too. But I think we, step by step, and then if the criteria is not right or the new criteria is not right, then each council could decide whether they wanted to review or not, because it would be either advantageous or not to them.
Any further questions on that? I'm sensing there's a bit of a consensus about which way we might proceed. But if we do proceed with option 3, then what you're suggesting, James, is that we would need to amend that option 3.
No. Sorry, Mr. Chair. No, look, on reading it, I think you can read it as implicit. The request to us implies we would have to get, doesn't mean that, just as long as everyone understands in doing that, we would then have to get permission elsewhere in order to be able to do it.
Thank you. Well, in that case, I'll put the motions, and then what we'll do is we'll amend and confirm which option we're going to go with.
Get a move in second.
Okay, so I'll put the motion that the Canterbury,
No, looking for a mover.
oh, okay, I'm looking for a mover.
I could, itself, I'd be looking at option 3, that the committee first gets the 2002 criteria and then requests that Waka Kotahi progress the review of the state highway policy and the state highway evaluation criteria as a priority by a certain date. And the minister will obviously hold this up for a month or 2 or years.
I'm happy to second that. Can you just, it's around requesting the policy first, is that correct? Yes, on that basis.
Can I just, we're just going to clarify the standing orders. Normally, we put all the motions and then we seek discussion on that, and any amendments will follow on that. So we'll just confirm process.
Yes, so under our standing orders, we're going to choose to move the entire motion as it is with all options. And then based on the discussion, we'll amend the motion 3 with the preferred option of the committee. If that fails, we'll move on to the next committee, next option.
Don't mean to be difficult, but normally understanding orders that we operate under as councils, we would move the preferred option as stated rather than debating something being moved and then try and amend it. May come an amendment following it, but normally the process we follow is reversed. I'm not sure what standing orders CCAN's following.
Standing orders are individual to each council, and this is our preferred way of proceeding.
I'll just present this, and then we'll seek discussion, and part of that discussion will be there'll be a
Yeah, would it be possible that we could be supplied a copy of ECAN's standing orders so we could be a bit more familiar with that process in future? I'm not going to argue about the process, but it'd be handy to know so that we're following it correctly ourselves.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to if it's okay with you, Mayor Gordon, I'm going to recommend that you I'm suggesting that you have indicated that you are foreshadowing an amendment to this. Mayor Brown, you're going to foreshadow the amendment when we get to it. I'll get you to do that. But look, I'll just put this whole thing first of all, and then we'll deal with the amendment. That the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee notes the request made by Mayor Broughton at the 1st of June 2023 Canterbury Regional Transport Committee meeting for the committee to support asking Waka Kotahi to undertake a review of the state highway designations, and 2 notes the key issues and options related to a review of new and existing state highway route designations in Canterbury outlined in this report, and agrees to proceed with either option. Either 3.1 option 1, do not request the Waka Kotahi undertake a review of the state highway designations in Canterbury. 3.2 option 2, request that Waka Kotahi undertake a review of the state highway designations in Canterbury. And 3.3 option 3, request that Waka Kotahi progress the review of the state highway policy and state highway evaluation criteria as a priority. I'll seek a mover and a seconder for the whole of this. I won't progress that, obviously. Who wishes to move?
It is a very unusual way of doing things that we'd effectively move 3 options. You'd move 3 and they're not one of those options. 1 and 2, I don't think there's any debate on. Just trying to help you, Mr. Chair, but the rest of us are looking at each other a bit perplexed.
We have to move all 3 to amend, to make the amendment to discard 2 of them. Mayor Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if I can help out here, because I don't feel like anything has been moved until one of us moves it. So there's nothing on the table to discuss until one of us moves option 1, 2, and 3, which I'm quite happy to do. So I get the tie up with what needs to be moved, but just because it's in a paper brought to us doesn't mean it needs to be the thing that the meeting agrees to then be amended. So If Dan is happy to move, I'd quite happily second 1, 2, and 3, 3, and then that becomes the motion, because until one of us moves something, there is nothing to further discuss.
No, I'd like someone to move. If you're moving, that's great.
I'm happy to move 1, 2, 3, and 3.3, noting that there is foreshadowed a potential amendment. Thank you.
And you're seconding, where Dan's moving?
No, new dance,
Oh, okay.
not the whole thing, but we can.
You take it? Take it out.
I'm only moving, I'm not foreshadowing anyone. I'm saying there is the need for
I could just make a comment while we're waiting. There's a recommendation written in front of us here, but that's only a staff recommendation, which we may like or we may not, and I don't like it. So the committee needs to make its own recommendation, which we will like and vote on for or against. Correct.
What I'm saying is that our standing orders, we move the motion, we get a seconder, we get a mover and a seconder, and then we discuss that, and then we make an amendment. So that's all we're doing. I've just moved that. I've just put that motion.
So if I could just add, then if there's no mover or no seconder, this motion then lapses for lack of a mover and a seconder.
Just for clarity, I think that there was to be foreshadowed a potential. I'm not going to second that for clarity, because I realise that will make things more complicated, but I'm sure there are others around the room. But can I just signal, I think this is the most odd way of doing things. And none of us who deal with this all the time handle it this way. But for this purpose, we would normally move an item in the way we want to do it. And can I just say that it's actually our meeting, not a meeting of staff.
Broughton, you moved, didn't you? The motion as I put it. Is that correct? You moved. Okay. Let's just. I know. You have to. Yeah. Okay. You've moved the whole. You've agreed to move it. With who's seconding it? Anybody? I'm seconding it. Now, is there any discussion on this? The discussion that we've really had is that item 3.3 is the preferred option. Does anybody wish to make an amendment to remove option 1 and 2?
Sorry.
And you're moving. Who's going to move that?
Sorry.
Councillor, Mr. Chair, we've moved 1, 2, 3, and option 3.3. Is that what it is? Yes, it's just. No, well, I haven't. I said I'd move option 1. I'd move 1, 2, 3, and 3.3, not 3.1 and 3.2. Because if you look at the recommendation, it says agrees to proceed with either. You have to choose one of those.
I just want to, sorry about this. We basically suggesting the current motion is lapsing. However, there is another motion on the table from Mayor Gordon, and we have a seconder from what you said before. The current motion has lapsed because we haven't had a mover and a seconder.
Guidance, Mr. Chair, is in that case Mayor Neil able to then move the wording that he proposed, because I would have preferred that. But do we then need to amend that afterwards? So I'm just seeking your guidance on that.
Just going to adjourn for a couple of minutes. We're just going to adjourn for a couple of minutes till we get the proposed new amendment in place, and then we'll go from there. Neil, could you just repeat your?
Let's see if I can do it the same as the first time. Request that Waka Katahi First, we request that we want to see the policy. The existing policy, great, yeah. And then we can decide if we want to ask Waka Kotahi to progress a review of the policy.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Yes, yes, it does.
Yeah.
2002.
But for that to happen, you'd have to get rid of number one, because number one is asking Waka Kotahi to undertake a review. We were not asking that at all.
It's just a notion.
Oh, just notes the request, sorry. Okay, fine.
Could I suggest we're putting the horse before the cart here? Maybe we shouldn't even worry about this, and we should be having a look at the policy for a start off to see if it's able to be used to get what Sam wants done. Why are we requesting a review when we haven't even looked at, don't even fully understand the existing policy?
Let's clarify the name of the policy. There's Waka Kotahi State Highway Review 2002 criteria. That's the name of the document itself. So we found it in the archives. Yeah. Wow.
And do we need to put time on that by next Friday or next meeting?
By next meeting.
Well, it's for us to see it. Yeah, it should be readily available, I would think. Hopefully it is, and within a imminent future, or not tying you to a time, but as soon as possible. Perhaps it's a click when you've got it.
On the wording, could we, where it says agrees to proceed with the request of Waka Kotahi, that the committee, not we, the committee be provided the existing criteria in order to further progress this item?
I'd be happy to move that recommendation.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, putting it, yes,
Okay.
right, yeah.
Putting this motion now, that the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee, one, notes the request made by Mayor Broughton at the 1st of June 2023 Canterbury Regional Transport Committee meeting for the committee to support asking Waka Kotahi to undertake a review of the state highway designations. And two, notes the key issues and options related to a review of new and existing state highway route designations in Canterbury outlined in this report. And three, agrees to proceed with a request to Waka Kotahi that the committee be provided with the existing Waka Kotahi State Highway Review 2002 criteria as soon as possible in order to further progress this item. Moved by Mayor Brown and seconded by Mayor Gordon. All those in favour, please say aye. Oh, you speak. Okay, sorry. I'll retract that. Any discussion on that?
Just briefly to say that I think this is a good way forward. I actually agree with Mayor Broughton that we should have a look at this, but I think the other comments around the room were really apt, that there are consequences in doing so. Looking forward to James finding that. Maybe a special task for him to find the policy, since he's having difficulty now. But for us, there are a number of roads in our district that we would certainly welcome being included. But I certainly wouldn't want any subtracted as a consequence of a review. So I think this is a really good way of progressing this. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for finding a way to progressing this item.
Thanks, Mayor Dan. It was a bit protracted, wasn't it? Okay, so no further discussion. Then all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. So just to make it clear about the way that our standing orders require me to put the motion, have a discussion, and if there's an amendment, we then make the amendment. Whether or not you like the actual motion at the time, we make an amendment to it. Is that okay? Just going forward. Anyway, 8.3. 8.3, the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan Review Regional Program of Activities. And we invite Claire Patterson. Claire, you're going to run and Sam. You're okay, Jess. So Claire's going to run a short presentation by way of explanation, because I know that this paper and the contents of it have caused some issues, and we just want to make sure the clarification of the process that the Transport Officers Group have gone through to arrive at the way at the rankings and how they've done that in a professional sense.
Excellent. So, and now for something completely different. If anybody gets that reference.
Everybody have a copy of that? Okay, cool.
It is a slide pack that summarises the paper, so it does have it's no new information. So this is the next step in regional land transport plan development. So there have been subsequent decisions made by the committee leading up to this point, including the February, where we updated the strategic framework, which had vision, objectives, targets, policies and priorities for the plan, which kind of sets us off in a direction for the planning process. And then we've updated the monitoring framework, the significance policy, significance criteria for the plan. And you may remember last meeting, there was a briefing where we discussed the weightings to give us guidance before we came with this paper. And so today we are looking at the weightings against the investment priorities, which sets the emphasis, and then there'll be a decision on the rankings separate from the weightings. So if you're thinking tweak the weightings to get a different rankings, you've got a decision on rankings, so you don't need to worry about tweaking the weightings so much, if that makes sense, how they work in combo there. And then also another decision on the approach to the program section, which we're looking to make some changes to that and getting a steer from you on that. So on those program changes, what you've been provided with is a concept document that is not the draft plan or content. It doesn't have the accurate figures in it. It doesn't. So if you looked at it and thought this is all wrong, it's actually a concept document. It's more about the headers and the layout rather than the content. So I just wanted to make that clear, and I'll talk more on each of these items. So the weighting, so the priorities, they were agreed in February, and then what we've got is weightings. These have been developed based on guidance that maintenance, operations and renewals was absolutely the priority investment to make, and that the committee wanted to see a shift towards the managing the exposure of extreme, the risk exposure to extreme events. And so these weightings then influence the rankings. Staff tested several different weightings, shifting them by 5% or 10%, and to see something shift more than sort of like 5 rankings, it really needs to be about a 15 to 20% shift in the weightings. That makes sense. So a change in weightings has to be a significant change in order to see a significant change in the rankings. So
Can I, sorry,
So this is what is proposed, that managing the risk of exposure to extreme events has been given a significant shift from 15% in 2021 to 35%. Now, where has that come from? So there's 2 new priorities, which last time equaled 50%, these now equal 40%, and safety going down 10% to make up that extra 20%. The reason the freight weighting is low is because of the nature of the RLTP and the investment in there in terms of that outcome. is not as significant impact on that outcome in the transport network compared to other investment being made through ECA or Waka Kotahi Innovation Fund or MB or even private sector development for freight. So that's why it's not saying that it's not important, it's saying in terms of the type of investment in this. Bring it there. The next decision is the rankings of the reasonably significant improvements within the entire program. So the LTMA requires us to prioritise and order these activities and assess their contribution. And it really is the culmination of successive decisions that have been made. And overall, the process that we took was similar to the 2021 process, which is based on the national guidance that's provided by Waka Kotahi. And this is the approach that was taken. So the activities are all collated. Then we apply the regional significance criteria that was approved previously, and then they get assigned to a single investment priority. That's the national guidance that has the single investment priority that's selected per activity. And then they are given a raw score. So this was officers from the authorised organisation provided the initial raw scoring to reflect the contribution that they were expected to make towards that priority. And that's based on things like the benefits framework provided by Waka Kotahi, which has a numerous number of benefits. So we're required to work to that as well. And then that was presented. We, as officers, we had a 2-day workshop with tables of people. Each table had representatives from different parts of Canterbury around it, and kind of moderated that scoring and those raw scores, considering their impact and deliverability. We didn't consider funding criteria or availability of funding in that process to ensure that we kind of looked at the importance and achievability. And then that score was then multiplied by the weightings for the priority, and that generates a final score, and then that score creates the order and gets turned into a range list. So we started with about 400 rows and ended up with the table that we had over about a 2-day workshop. Quite a significant piece of work. So the figures are not final. They continue to be refined. What's important is the order of activities, and that the process reflects the importance. The process is designed to really remove staff kind of cognitive bias and focus on the kind of technical aspects. And it's not the same process as what's used by Waka Kotahi in their funding decision-making process. So the main difference is Waka Kotahi has a multi-benefit approach, so they can consider the multiple benefits of a project. In our national guidance, it's just a single benefit. And the transport officers was raised in the meetings that this isn't what we think is necessarily the best process. We are following national guidance on that, and so it would be really good if the national guidance was updated, so we actually end up with similar rankings to what might come from a Waka Kotahi decision-making process. Or we can make our own rankings and tell our own story. Which comes to this. Amendment, we're proposing an amendment to the recommendations to better align with the draft GPS. Been kind of tricky. We're working legally, we have to work to the 2021 GPS because that's still the GPS that's in place. But there's probably going to be a new GPS in place within the period of tabling this plan, which we don't know quite what it looks like. So we kind of have these discussions around how do we make this align, because you do have a duty to ensure as a committee that it is consistent with the GPS. So we think the best change that can be made is to move the Woodend bypass, or the Christchurch Northern Link, which includes the Woodend bypass, as a significant investment from 12th up to 3rd, and that would better align the program with the government policy statement. And that was in the submission as well that the committee made in terms of the significant investments in the region. In addition to, when you're looking at this, we've also provided as an appendix the climate consideration. So we've done an analysis using CATI, which is a climate assessment tool that's being used across the sector in regional transport planning. It was a tool that was used in the Auckland RLTP last time, and when their plan was taken to court by climate activists, and the decisions around climate impact were considered, the tool kind of stood up, held its mettle in court. So we thought, well, that sounds like a jolly good tool to use, doesn't it? So we've provided you with that advice as well in terms of the climate impact. At this stage, the overall climate impact rating of the full program, so that's including a large portion of the maintenance, operations and renewals, is negative 0.51. So that's on a scale of +3 to -3. So it's slightly negative. But if you remove the maintenance, because what the tool does is that it kind of assumes that you're maintaining a system that is generating emissions, that maintenance actually has a slightly negative score. If you remove the maintenance component, then our improvement proportion is in the positive 0.34. So the improvement investment is heading in the right direction. And potentially with the tool over time, as the transport system moves to a lower emissions transport system, then maintenance might not have a negative score to it, but it does in the current tool. So that's provided for your consideration, and I'm pointing it out. So if you get taken to court, you can remember we had this conversation. Yeah. And then the third decision is on a new concept for the program section. So there's a legal requirement for the plan to be affordable and feasible, but there is a significant challenge in terms of the level of funding. But there's kind of been a change in practice over time. We had it last time in the RLTP. You might remember we had the narrative section where we talked about things that were on the horizon that we kind of like to see. Other committees are kind of doing a similar thing where they might have more of a table and more oomph to it. And so we've been in discussions with Ministry of Transport staff as well, and they're sort of saying they'd love to see actually what's sitting out there, what the funding gap is, rather than it being kind of curated. So I put together this concept document to kind of give you the idea of what might be put out there if we kind of take this approach, and it could end up signalling billions. The numbers are not real numbers in there, not real content at the moment. It's just to give you an idea of the concept of having an amount for future consideration, and if you're happy with putting that in your RLTP. There's the benefit of doing this is that it might lead to greater government investment. It means an incoming government might pick something and fund it, I'm not sure. However, it may lead to some confusion for the community as to what is actually being delivered, because you've kind of got a plan that has sort of two parts to it. One part which is the affordable and feasible, and another part which is less so. Maybe that risk is mitigated by the fact that the main audience or the local community is mostly looking at your own transport plans, and that this plan is mostly looked at by government officials and used by officials to understand what Canterbury needs. So those are kind of the three decisions. The weightings, which is where you want to put the emphasis. The rankings, which is not tied to likelihood of funding. And the approach to the program section. And the other thing with the program section is last time we did the RLTP, I got some feedback from the committee that it was kind of hard to, it was almost like a pivot point in the document. You kind of read through this kind of strategic front end and then you pivot to a whole lot of tables with not much narrative around it. It wasn't really tying well to the overall story. So we think that taking this approach might help to tell how the investment actually aligns to what's important. So that's the overview.
Thanks, Claire. Would one else take questions? And James, you had a question, and then Dan, have you got Neil?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Claire, really, it's just a question around detail. Which detail matters today as opposed to will matter in the future? I'll take it. I'll take you on your word. We don't need to concern ourselves with the written text of the draft placeholder text. That is like the concept. We'll let you iterate on the detail there. With regard to the regionally significant project list, should I concern myself with particular names of projects?
The names have been provided to us by officers. So we can change that as we go. It's not the draft plan.
In that case, and I mean no disrespect to the Mayor of Ashburton, but the Ashburton Bridge is not on State Highway 1. I don't think there is any intention by this project to replace the State Highway 1 bridge. It is a second Ashburton Bridge and needs to be declared as such. Beyond that, I'll leave it.
Can I say, firstly, thank you for the proposed amendment, and I assume that by reference in the document which refers to includes this attachment 8.31, this is in the wording, that would be based on the amended suggestion. Is that correct?
The table at the moment still has it at 12th, not at 3rd. So the 8.3.1 that you've got, everything, it would go 1, 2, then there'd be a new line with putting with the link as 3, and then the other rankings would all go down 1. Yeah. Would then start at 4 for the Conway Bridge replacement.
That require the wording to be changed in the recommendation, or is it based on what I'm meaning is obviously 8.3.1 in our document is not as being proposed by the slide pack, right? So does it need to be amended, or do we just assume that if members agree that that is included as the Woodend bypass or northern, what do we call it, the Christchurch Northern Link is included as number 3? Am I making myself clear? Yes, sorry.
Yeah, so I think the advice we were given was to reword because the table wasn't going to be updated in time, to reword the recommendations so that it was really clear that that change was going to happen.
I see and understand that. Now, can I just say, just in general, what a mammoth task I think you've had in putting this together. We as a council would have some suggestions for future processes. It was a great concern to us that the operations group and the CEG or CEs hadn't been involved, but I appreciate the explanation you've given today around that. But we would like to see probably a different process going forward, and perhaps the operations group may wish to reflect on that, because look, I'm not going to go through the relative merits or others that are in here because that's unfair. But there are some concerns we had in that. I take it, just so I'm absolutely clear as well, in the draft versions with placeholder text and figures, that we some incorrect figures exist for our district. These are just placeholders, and so when we supply, and if we supply corrected figures, which I understand our staff have, that they would be repopulated. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. We've actually, I mean, that concept document was actually initially drafted a couple of weeks ago, and then we've done lots more work with even other authorised organisations since then, but we're doing that in the actual draft plan document rather than trying to keep the concept document updated. So when we come back in November with the draft plan, the figures will be as accurate. I don't want to say accurate, but as accurate as we have them at the time. Yeah.
Jesse, you replied.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, in response to Mayor Dan's, Mayor Gordon's comments around the operations forum and the chief executives forum. Had discussions with Marie McNeely, the principal secretariat for the mayoral forum, about the process, because this is a committee of the Environment Canterbury in terms of regional transport committee. The Transport Officers Group doesn't have the same structure at present as what other groups within the mayoral forum structure do. We've tried to align up to the CE forum. Happy to take that feedback on board, and we'll look at whether the operations forum or the policy forum or another option in that space as we go forward with RLTPs in the future. So we'll certainly take that feedback on board, and we were attempting to do that through the CE forum as a good step towards the committee after this. So noting that most of the members of this committee are also the same members of the mayoral forum.
Thanks, Jess. Mayor Brown.
Yeah, just got a question and then probably a couple of comments. The draft GPS 2024, when does that become final?
Through Mr. Chair, well, obviously in a couple of weeks we've got an election. Depending on the nature of the outcome of the election, we'll have more information around the date for release of the GPS. So, sorry.
Oh, look, I mean, even if you've got briefings to incoming ministers, it would have to be early next year at the earliest. And I think the in terms of next steps and what we're planning towards would be to have a draft RLTP to you in November with consultation sort of February, hearings and deliberations sort of March. So it's going to be really touch and go as to legally the committee has to ensure that the plan adheres to whatever the GPS is before it gets passed from this committee to Environment Canterbury for adoption. And it's going to be within that sort of period. So we're taking a risk management approach as to what we kind of work to.
Could I suggest that we'll continue to monitor, obviously, the progress of the GPS being landed, depending on whichever flavour of government we have going forward. And we'll continue to provide advice up to the Regional Transport Committee as we progress this process through, particularly as we go through into the hearings, post-consultation, and any amendments that need to be made to align in that regard.
Right, so the comment I got now, and I've read it here, staff have taken direction in the draft GPS into account to reduce the risk that the final RLTP does not align with the new GPS, and that's excellent for practice. So I go to the table now, and just following on from James Cagle, the project number 1, which is, it should read, the second Ashburton Bridge State Highway 1 project, because in the GPS draft, the Minister has said in there that it is a State Highway 1 project which will be managed by Wakatahi and built by Wakatahi, paid 100% by the government, which is anyone other than Ashburton District Council. So with those amendments to say what the project is, and then under organisation, Ashburton District Council is removed and Wakatahi is put in because it's a Wakatahi project, as per the GPS draft statement says.
Invite James Cagle to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So look, our view would be that provided the name has changed and the number continues to be updated as per staff advice, in line with the GPS, it's accurate to date. So I can't recall being able, given that I was on video last time, talking the committee through this last time, but it makes sense to do it now if I haven't. So as the current draft GPS works, contains a very short section of strategically important projects to the government two of which are the Ashburton Second Bridge and Christchurch Northern Link, including the Woodend Bypass. The Christchurch Northern Link one's relatively simple in that it's a state highway project on a state highway. The Ashburton Bridge, within the law, directs Waka Kotahi or envisages directing Waka Kotahi to look at the corridor challenge on the state highway, posed by the limitations around the existing State Highway 1 bridge. But we know, because of the work that we have done with ADC, well, actually the work that ADC has done, the solution to that problem lies off the state highway corridor on the local road network. That is why ADC has their second bridge project. So the second bridge is a local road project and has to be, as I understand it, in the system from that road controlling authority. So from ADC. So it needs to stay as an ADC project. If the GPS, for all the complicated timing that you just talked through in terms of arriving at a finalised GPS sometime in the beginning of next year, stays as on the direction of the draft GPS, we would anticipate being in a position to take that project. But in order to get it there, to be able to take it up, it needs to stay there as a local project in the system. We can't put a project on you, and we can't take it off you unless you put it up. Does that make sense? So this is the correct way to display it for now, and we need to then see how the GPS matures to its final conclusion. But that's how we would expect it to run.
So we're putting it up, but the final delivery of it will be sorted at a later date after the GPS. Okay, is that right, Jess?
Clarify. So if we are still calling it the second Ashburton Bridge, it says dash State Highway 1. Are we saying State Highway 1 project? Project, yep. Just so I'm very clear as to what the wording is, but leaving the organisation as Ashburton District, as per what James has just explained. Yep. Okay. Just so that we're clear in terms of the wording. Just in terms of the recommendations, then I'm happy if committee members are happy that that conversation is captured in the minutes, and we'll make those changes unless you want that specifically reflected in the amendment. But I think we're quite happy to take those minor corrections, if you like, as wording to the document itself, whereas the substantial amendment is actually around the change of the ranking of the order of the list. So just in terms of the amendment there, yeah, over to you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was going to say
we'll note those and pass it on for you guys to note. We don't really want an amendment to this. Councillor Barnes, and then Councillor Munro.
Thank you. Through the chair, just clarity on, and you probably answered it actually, but where does electioneering promises fit into this, or are they taken into account? We've heard some of those electioneering promises and
so we can only work with the information that we're provided by the authorised organisations. So we, when putting together the program, it's proposed by the authorised organisations. And in terms of the funding section, which is still in development, we're going back to those authorised organisations and taking their information as of now. But it's always with the RLTP, things are subject to change, and you can make variations to an RLTP. And one of the benefits in that kind of concept document that's provided is by having those sort of future considerations. If there's different decisions made, you can then make variations just by tabling it with the committee without substantial consultation.
yeah, thank you for that. And my second part of my question,
just regarding the weightings, the overall rankings, if you're slotting in a number 3, so there's 3 at rank 3 there now. So will they be those 3 ranked as 4s? So there won't be they'll just
With it. The numbering would drop down, be reordered in accordance with what's already there, but it's just that the Ashburton, Northern Link has gone up to number 3, so everything drops down a number, if you like.
Just before I move to you, and James, do you? Well,
Just a clarification on previous.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. No, just making sure I'm clarifying things with staff, just to the risk of really confusing everything. I'm advised that the easiest way to proceed on the name for the Ashburton project is the existing name that sits in TO, so that we're not messing with project names halfway through a process, right? And that is Ashburton Tynwald Connectivity. Now we know that to be the second bridge connectivity. That's how it's listed in the system. That's how it's gone through the business case and process so far. So I suggest, in the interest of not messing with things, we keep it moving as it is listed, as it moves through the pipeline. So Ashburton Tynwald Connectivity is how it's listed. If everyone's comfortable, that's how I'd rename it on this list. Connectivity.
We'll just note that in the minutes. Okay. So you're right. That's cool. You're right with that. Ashburton dash Tynwald connection connectivity. Okay. Thank you. Mayor Munro.
I just want to make the comment that through the concept of the program section, the absence of activity in the Mackenzie. There is one project, and it has been brought up with Waka Kotahi, and that's and whether it should be in the connected public transport and active transport section 3 or 4 safety or 5 on the horizon. It's a project, and comparatively speaking, it's a small project. It's a footbridge, cycle bridge across the Opahi on the eastern entrance to Fairley from Geraldine. I think I would like to see it there somewhere, please. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go Mayor Sam, and then we'll go to Neil, and then we'll go to Scott.
Thank you, Grant, and thanks for the patience for those in the room. It's actually really difficult doing this online, and I'm going to make sure a priority I try and be in the room next time round. Thanks for your patience with the process. I think that there's a few things that have come up. One is how we could align our process with Waka Kotahi's process, and if the advice to us is different than the advice to Waka Kotahi, but we know they're not going to follow the advice to us. I just feel like we've obviously got the option to think about what advice was given to them, so that we don't end up talking to a community about one thing or raising expectations in our council about one thing, only for Waka Kotahi to come back and actually say, well, he didn't look broad enough, or he didn't consider this, and then it gets taken away. So I think there are some improvements for us to think about next time as we move into this. Just so that we don't miss each other. It's got to be partnership, councils and Waka Kotahi. I'm not sure if you're wanting to enter into discussion too much. I don't have too many questions, but there's just a couple of things I want to say from outside the room. It might just be easier if I say them now. I feel a wee bit sad for 2050 when I look at the list that we've come up with, and that it might not be quite aspirational enough for our grandchildren. There's a key part that most of us are going to need to keep driving our cars for quite a long time, and in order to do that and reduce VKT, we need Christchurch to get out of their cars. And so thinking about what we might need to do in districts that aren't ours, it is actually quite hard to do through this process, to take a Canterbury approach, because we all know our own local projects so well. But it's actually kind of hard to get the Canterbury perspective on it, which as a committee, that should be our lens that we're coming to this with. And so without the data and science across Canterbury being put in front of us, there's just a whole lot of trust in the process and in the transport officers moving us through, which is great. Good to have the CEs involved in this. I think thinking about how we do that next time will be important. And So I'm keen to think about what might inform us next time. And I know that we're agreeing for today, but like we should have is there a transport resilience study for Canterbury so that we actually know what is the most important bridges, what are the most important corners, where are the rivers most taking us, or the ocean putting us most at risk. And I know where the risk factors are in my own district, but it's really hard to get the Canterbury perspective on that without the information available to me through this committee or through other ways. So yeah, just for next time, if we could have a bit more time, I suppose, on this and a bit more info. It was good at doing the weightings, but it's hard to do the weightings just in isolation without that. So the order and priority for me, it's too finicky to try and move and argue and discuss. Like, it is what it is, and I want to say thank you to everyone that's put all that through and the changes brought up today. If it makes sense, then let's just get on with the agreement on that. I think the only part from me is the narrative and what we want to say. And I guess all of us have put collectively millions of dollars into projects that are really well advanced. They're supported by councils in Waka Kotahi. They've had business cases, there's land acquisition, there's planning matters, there's been community consultation. And the New Zealand Duck projects specifically come to mind on that. And through the narrative section, I'd like us to think about finishing what we've started rather than always jumping onto new things and wasting the precious resource around transport that we have. So if something in the narrative section can be included to talk about that, that would be really helpful. As we look to the future post-election, I feel like political alignment can be really dangerous, and we need to focus on what's good for Canterbury and then help inform the parties about what they can deliver for us, because we know our communities best. And not, you know, I'm not sure that Wellington has the greatest ideas about what should be delivered locally. So I'd like to think about how we, maybe it's ahead of the next election, make sure that the Canterbury priorities are put forward to all the political parties. So when they're talking, they can talk to our projects rather than just thinking up things that then get talked about on the campaign trail. And overall, I don't think we can remove the maintenance from decisions. Too often we do that, we build something and don't take in the operations of it. So I don't like that approach, and I don't think that we should approach it here as a group. We want to take on the full life cost of the things that we build, and that should always be a part of our planning. Otherwise, we're just lumping the next council with the decisions that we make today. So thanks, Grant, for allowing me to go through that. I just thought if I come in once, rather than coming in and out, might be easier from an out of the room perspective.
Thanks, Sam, and staff will take a note of what you're saying here as well. Thank you. Mayor Brown and then Scott. And
I'm on page 55 of the report under 2, manage risk of exposure to extreme events. And halfway down in the up to 3rd paragraph towards the end, it says, while Ashburton ratepayers have committed what they can to this project, there's still a significant gap for this priority project to be delivered. And Ashburton District Council are seeking government co-investment, which is wrong. Ashburton District Council is not seeking government's co-investment, because there's no co-investment to be given from the Ashburton District Council, because in the GPS it says 100% funded by government. So is that statement from history, or is it for going forward? That's my question.
Yeah, we can definitely amend that sentence. Yeah, it's based on, you know, what I knew as opposed to the current state. So yeah, we can look at it. And I think the funding and financing section is more, that section will be more up to date, and it's probable that this section won't talk about the funding of specific projects, and then the finance section might have the funding in it.
Could I just follow with that? I think this just comes back to the conversation that was had earlier about, as James said, around the having it in the LTP, not having it in the LTP, to then attract who takes the project and that type of thing. So I think we may note this as a bit of a placeholder. Keep an eye over where the GPS gets to post-election, and then ensure that we have the correct wording around what investment approach is required, whether that's 100% funded by government or whether there's some degree of co-investment approach as whatever comes out of discussions that you will have, obviously.
What we can do for the draft by November is we could make an assumption for some of the top four biggies that are in the GPS and make an assumption that the large proportion of it will be government funded. So it would still have the proposing organisation being the Ashburton District Council. So I'm thinking of things like PT Futures, MRT, Ashburton Second Bridge, Wood End Bypass, and kind of having a grouping of those in the funding section that talks about them requiring a substantial investment from government and put it in that way.
Perhaps, but the GPS, as it says now, is it's 100% funded by government. So there's no co-investment. So the wording, I believe, should be changed to
with respect, that's not what the GPS says. I understand the conversations that have occurred, but all the GPS says.
Yeah, I'm also aware that the legal review that will be undertaken before we provide you with the draft plan, they will be using the 2021 GPS. So there's a requirement under section 16 that we get a review against section 14, and to do that they'll be using the 2021 GPS. So we've pushed where we think we can in terms of the alignment to the draft, but still being able to table a plan against the 2021 GPS in November.
I think you just appreciate how fluid this whole process is kind of still at the moment, particularly around elections and GPS directions. So we're happy to take a lot of this advice on board and just keep some placeholder text, if you like, so that we can then, because in November you're going to have the opportunity to go back over this again as a draft plan before we go out to consultation. So whatever changes need to be made at that point as well, we'll do those as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Just with regards to the GPS, I don't know if this is cheeky, ask for a correction or recalibration, but I do note there with the Rakai and the Rangitata bridges not being anywhere on here, and with particular regards to resilience, but where it says, for example, also within the Christchurch and Ashburton corridor, noting that Rangitata is past Ashburton, should it actually properly be named Christchurch to Timaru corridor? That might be a question for you, Mr. Cagle. And I've got another. Did you want to address that before I go to the next one?
I'm looking quizzically at officers because I can't remember what the submission on it. I mean, it wasn't me, but I can't remember where the submission from the committee actually went to. But there was a suggestion to extend the corridor that far. So it's for officers to comment on, not me.
Yeah, when we come back with the draft plan, we'll double check it against that and make sure it's saying the right thing.
Wonderful, thank you. And with regards to public transport, it's a little unclear to us whether the Timaru My Way on demand system is confirmed as a long-term service and no longer a trial. And at the same time, just a comment there that we do think it should be noted that there are no discount fares on that service. And you've seen the numbers as to how well it is performing, I have no doubt. And it clearly shows that it's the flexibility and the convenience that's driving the demand, not the low cost, not discounted fares.
Yes, so we've been working with our PT colleagues. We're in different teams, so we kind of ECAN, but also ECAN, as to how to represent the PT investment in the RLTP in a better, clearer way, because traditionally it's just been one big line item that's kind of gone $1 billion continuous program, whereas actually it's critical for telling the story of the investment that's needed across Canterbury and where it needs to go. So in working with the ECAN staff, our understanding is there's a commitment from ECAN to My Way in Timaru that's folded into the ongoing amount of money. And so that's why it's pulled out in the narrative as being an investment that's being made as opposed to being itemised as a regionally significant investment.
Oswald, would you like to?
Certainly included it in our submissions, and also we're very keen to talk to Wakakotahi about, now that the SPTF has been put in place, translating it into a permanent and ongoing service rather than the trial that it currently is. But that's obviously subject to further discussions with James and his colleagues.
I've just got one more, please. Yes, yeah, and I'd get in trouble if I didn't go back and first of all say we are very pleased with what's the walking and cycling implementation of the strategy for Wash Dyke and Eaton Hayes Resilient Rails Crossing. If I didn't stress that we're disappointed that the Aurari Bridge widening hasn't appeared after many, many years of fighting for that. And again, talking about resilience and, second inland routes. So if I didn't say that, I'd be in trouble. So you do need to note it.
Hamish Dobby, you're online. Have you got a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just seeking your leave to make a comment, if I may.
Yes.
It's a comment about process and the process for prioritisation. So as you've been made aware, the Transport Officers Group worked through a process to come up with a prioritisation, and there's now a desire to change that prioritisation, and that's right and proper that a change to the prioritisation can be made by the Regional Transport Committee. My comment, and it's not designed to be a negative comment about the Wood End bypass, because the Wood End bypass is also very important for the Horonui district as well. My comment is the process by which that change has occurred. And my view is that, the job of officers is to present the prioritisation that they've come up with, and then this group should formally resolve to make a change to that priority. So it's very clear where that's come from. So I just want to make that comment. Thank you.
Yep, I think. Yeah, we'll move the first two, and then we'll go to 3 and 4. Yeah, we'll do it. Okay, I'm gonna put the motion, and then a call for a mover and a seconder. Okay.
Could I just clarify, Mr. Chair? Are we putting the motion for each individual part of the?
A motion for the weightings, a motion for the rankings, and then a motion for the proof of concept.
We're moving 1 and 2 together, and then 3 and 4. Okay. So I'm just going to, I'll put 1 and 2 together. I'll do 1 and 2 first. I'll put 1 and 2.
You think that's the whole lot all about
yeah.
Okay.
Would everyone like me to move the whole thing together? So move by vote. Yeah, this is the staff amendment. So the staff recommendations. Is it easy to do 1 and 2?
So the wording that's provided here is the amended recommendation. So that's why it won't be in the papers that you've got.
Do you want to have a wee moment to just confirm that you understand what we're doing?
I'm going to explain the amendment stuff.
Yeah, if you could just explain it.
So the first part, number 1, is essentially what is in your packs, your agenda pack, about the approved weightings. So that hasn't changed. Number 2 is the new part to the amendment, which is that the committee notes the ranked regionally significant improvement activities based on those weightings of the 10-year transport investment priorities in association with the key evaluation criteria. And that's what Claire ran you through at the start with the slide deck. Number 3 is essentially replacing 2 that's in your current agenda pack, and that is approves the proposed, the ranked regionally significant improvement activities.
So
That's replaces part 1 of your agenda pack, which is around approving the list, subject to the Wood End bypass, the Northern Corridor Northern Link being brought up to number 3. And then number 4 is about approving the proposed approach to the regional program section, which is the concept part that Claire talked through in the slide deck. So that's essentially broken that up into 4 sections. So the first part being the weightings, approving those weightings, and then ranking those significant improvement activities in line with those weightings, and then approving the list as put forward with the amendments, and also then approving the proposed approach. Does that make sense? Yep.
Okay, we'll move the whole lot together. Moved by Mayor Gordon, seconded by whoever seconded by Mayor Brown. Any discussion?
Just to speak to it, I was actually going to make similar comments to what Mayor Borton mentioned before, which I think is absolutely right. Our ambition should be far greater for Canterbury across the board. It's a paltry, no disrespect, but it's a paltry amount compared to the overall spend that is spent throughout New Zealand. I think all the projects actually, to be honest, to a degree, probably deserve equal ranking because they're all priorities in our respective areas. But I respect the work that's gone into this by the TOG, and I've raised some concerns about process and rankings. I just don't really want to get into that today. I think it's a matter that our operations and CEs will sort out in discussions in due course. If we're not ambitious for our region, and I think this is something we need to do post-election to see that our share is improved, then we will, I think that we will be disappointed. So I think that's a matter that we need to consider post-election. That's work that Local Government New Zealand is presently underway, and Mayor Neil Holdham, who's been a strong advocate in that direction, a number of us have seen and supported his work. I agree with Mayor Borton too around maintenance, and it needs to be full life cost. We're all suffering because of that and the lack of subsidy that we do receive. Our district, in fact, put more in, and I know the rest of us do each year just to keep up with it. But it's also critically important that what we put in here is not inconsistent with the GPS, because that's what we're required to do. And if we don't rank as in the top rankings as it was there, then all the submissions we made, I think, will fall on deaf ears. We have a government now that has put together a GPS. It's indicated where it's favouring. We don't know future government where they may be, but actually the projects that have been mentioned are actually already, as I understand it, priorities on both sides of politics. I agree with Mayor Brown around Ashburton, and we need to do our best to make sure that that is 100% funded, as has been indicated. And it's certainly something that will carry my full support. But in general, thanks to the staff for the work they've done. It's a particularly difficult exercise. We've all got priorities in that. And it's just unfair that we can't shuffle them around as we would like them. But anyway, we can't all have it our own way all the time. But thank you for the work the staff put into it.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, okay. Anyone else like to comment? I just want to comment and again, thanks staff for putting the slide pack together by way of an explanation, which I think was very helpful. Hopefully it was helpful to everybody. And it's a big task. And there are some processes along the way. Just to sort of break with what we, Claire, is there an opportunity before the November meeting for an early draft or an up-to-date draft prior to the formalization, or is that just not needed and we deal with it at the meeting?
So where we're at the moment is, in terms of the project timeframes, we're aiming to have our first Word document draft by Wednesday next week, which will then go to which we're going to check over again internally, and then we're going to send it to the Transport Officers group on the 16th of October for the Transport Officers to have their run through then. We've got a Transport Officers meeting on the 19th of October. And so we're hoping to get all the transport officers' feedback. So if that's probably the best way, if there's feedback back down through transport officers into that. And then it goes to comms for redesign and putting it from a Word document into a lovely PDF. But we're absolutely working at pace. And then the PDF has to go to legally. It goes to stakeholders like the Regional Commissioner for Police and places like that. And so we're kind of in a week by week turnaround. So it's a bit of a push to do any earlier than for the committee meeting.
Really critical that you get your feedback through your transport
officers.
Yes, that's the key, and that's a message to when that draft comes. When your transport officers come, that's the time for you guys to make some comment and then come back to us, so that at least when we do have the draft in November, the amount of questions and changes are minimal, hopefully. Well, there being no further discussion on that, then all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks, Craig.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry I have to part earlier. I've got to go and open something, so apologies for that. I am opening an art exhibition, so I am actually opening something genuinely. You're most welcome to come.
3.4, South Island Regional Transport Committee. I take that report as being read. Chair Scott and I are Canterbury representatives on that committee. And the general gist of it is that, or maybe Luke, would you like to just explain the key priorities that came out of that discussion? That would be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A meeting was held on the 17th of July. And the key priorities that came out of it was the CDM road closures project, which is seeking to improve reporting on road closures across the Canterbury region, and the South Island Freight project, which is option 5 in the attached list. So we've begun work on that with Waka Kotahi staff scoping it behind the scenes, and an online meeting is scheduled for 29th of November. So that's continuing to progress. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke. Are there any questions about the report? I think one of the key things that the discussion was about, we had a few presentations, and one of them was about New Zealand's critical infrastructure, and there was a comment that our flood protection stop banks and things were not part of that, seen as not part of the critical infrastructure, and yet they support and safeguard the national infrastructure, like bridges and roads and things like that. So there seemed to be a disconnect. But anyway, we sort of picked that up. One of the things, and we talked about it just before, that the group are really keen to do is ensure that we advocate for the South Island transport issues as a whole, and that we need to make a strong voice, which is what we're saying for Canterbury as well, a stronger voice in central government for the issues that are facing us in terms of resilience and other issues as well. That seemed to be pretty hot on the agenda. And I think freight issues were also important with rail and how that's handled going forward. Well, look, if there's no more questions, I'll just take it for read, and then I'll put the motion that the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee receives the minutes of the 18th of July 2023 meeting of the South Island Regional Transport Committee Chairs Group. Do I have a mover for that? Mayor Munro, seconded. Mayor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Carried. Okay. Final report then is 8.5, report from the chair, and this is really just confirming the support that we were wanting on the GPS from the government, and it's just a copy of the Mayoral Forum submission on the GPS, and I think the key things at the end of the report really, we'd like to see central government co-funding for flood protection and river maintenance works, noting really that the river maintenance and flood protection schemes protect nationally significant Crown infrastructure that has benefits beyond the communities within flood protection areas. And and item 19 there on page 128, many of our road and rail bridges in Canterbury are approaching the end of their design life and need a renewal, and in need of renewal, such as the Ashley River Bridge and Ashburton Bridge, that are included in the SIP, and many others that are not, such as the Upper Arari, Rakaya, Rangatata, and Huranui Bridge on State Highway 1, and single lane bridges, which is, I think that's the only single lane bridge in Canterbury, Canterbury Highway, State Highway. So what I'll do is I'll put the motion. Basically, the letter is suggesting that we supporting the draft GPS in terms of the Christchurch Northern Link, which includes the Woodend bypass and the second Ashburton Bridge, as we've talked about before. Put the motion that the Canterbury Regional Transport Committee receives the report from the chair. We have a mover. Mayor Munro, seconder. Mayor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Great. Carried. Thank you. This resolution to go into public excluded. Thank you. I move that Jeremy Dixon, Manager of Public Transport Business Services and Improvements, remain after the public have been excluded for item 9.1.1, and that Jessie Burgess, Senior Strategy Manager, remains after the public have been excluded because they have knowledge relevant to the matters under consideration. Moved by Mayor Munro, seconded by Mayor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you.